How does a small, nomadic tribe, living on the edge of a dying empire, become a global superpower? And how do they do it in less than 100 years? Well, today, we're diving into the incredible 90-year explosion that created the Ottoman Empire.
So our story kicks off not with a big battle, but with the last words of a dying father to his son. It's around 1324, and Osman Ghazi, the guy who started it all, is on his deathbed. And what he passes on to his heir, Orhan, isn't a crown or some grand military strategy. It's this simple, powerful idea, this principle that justice is the bedrock of a state. Well, that would become the moral and political foundation for everything that came next.
And the result of following that idea? Absolutely staggering. I mean, think about it. When Osman died, he left his son a pretty small principality. Basically a river valley, a few towns, a sword, and that idea. Fast forward just 2 generations to 1389, and his grandson is ruling a massive empire spanning 2 continents, from a capital city in Europe, commanding an army the world had literally never seen before. So how on earth did they pull off such a meteoric rise?
Well, the first part of the answer lies with Osman's son, Orhan. This guy wasn't just another conqueror, he was an architect. He was the man who would draw the blueprints for a real, functioning state. Orhan's first major move was taking the city of Bursa in 1326. But he didn't just conquer it and move on. By making this wealthy, established Byzantine city his new capital, he sent a clear message. The Ottomans weren't just nomadic raiders anymore. They were here to build, to rule, and they were here to stay. See, Orhan's real genius was knowing that taking territory is one thing, but holding it is the real challenge. So he started building the institutions of a state from the ground up. He established a system of governance with judges and tax collectors. He created a real economy, minting the very first official Ottoman coins. And crucially, he formed a standing paid army, a professional force that was loyal only to him, not to some distant tribe. With a solid state starting to form in Asia, their ambition turned west, across the water, to a whole new continent, Europe. And the pace of their advance was just relentless. After Bursa, the other major Byzantine cities of Nicaea and Nicomedia fell one after another. By the 1350s, the Ottomans controlled the entire Asian coast of the Sea of Marmara. They were literally staring right across Dardanelles Strait into Europe. But the big question was, how are they going to cross it? You know, their path into Europe wasn't carved out by some grand invasion. It was opened by a perfect storm of political chaos and just sheer dumb luck. It started with an invitation and ended with an act of God. So get this, the Byzantine Empire was basically tearing itself apart in a civil war. One of the contenders, desperate for help, actually invited Orhan's troops to cross into Europe to be his allies. Then, in 1354, fate just intervened. A massive earthquake completely shattered the walls of the fortress at Gallipoli. The Byzantine soldiers fled, and the Ottoman soldiers just walked in. And just like that, they had their permanent bridgehead into Europe. They never left. With that permanent base in Europe, the stage was set for the next great leader, Orhan's son, Murad I. Now, if Orhan was the architect of the state, Murad was the guy who would forge it into a true empire.
Murad's very first move was a statement of just breathtaking ambition. He captures the major European city of Adrianople, renames it Edirne, and moves his capital there, all the way from Asia. This wasn't just a conquest, it was a declaration. The Ottomans no longer saw themselves as Asian invaders. They were a permanent European power.
But to control a growing European empire, Murad needed a new kind of army, one that was loyal only to him, not to old tribal loyalties. His solution was absolutely revolutionary. The Janissaries, which literally means the new soldiers.
The Janissaries were unlike any other army in the world at the time. Through a system called the Devshirme, the Ottomans recruited young Christian boys from their territories in the Balkans. These boys were converted to Islam, given a top-tier education, and put through elite military training. Because they were totally cut off from their birth families and weren't allowed to marry, they had no local loyalties. Their only allegiance was to the Sultan himself, who they saw as their father. This created a core of fanatically loyal, professional super soldiers. So with this new army and a new European capital, Murad pushed deeper and deeper into the Balkans. And this, of course, set up an inevitable collision course with the last major power standing in the way, the Serbian kingdom. The final decisive showdown would come on a field in Kosovo.
The scale of this was just immense. On June 15, 1389, two massive armies met on the Kosovo Polia, the Field of Blackbirds. We're talking nearly 80,000 soldiers in total. The Ottomans on one side, a coalition of Serbs and their allies on the other. The fate of the entire Balkans was going to be decided in a single brutal day.
The fighting was absolutely furious, with devastating losses on both sides. And then, right in the middle of the chaos, something happened that could have completely shattered the Ottoman army. According to the stories, a Serbian knight pretending to be a deserter got into the Sultan's tent and fatally stabbed Murad. Just like that, the Sultan was dead, the first and only Ottoman ruler ever to be killed on the battlefield. Now, this should have been the end. The army should have panicked and run. But Murad's son, Bayezid, was on the field. They called him Yildirim, or the Lightning, because he was so fast and decisive. And he lived up to the name. He instantly took command, there was no panic, no retreat. Bayezid rallied the Ottoman forces, crushed the remaining Serbs, and secured a total, decisive victory. The Battle of Kosovo. It was like the bloody exclamation point on this incredible century of transformation. The Ottoman conquest of the Balkans was now complete, and the scale of their rise was, well, it was simply unprecedented.
I mean, just look at the transformation in only 65 years. A small border principality became an empire spanning 2 continents. A local chief became a sultan. A ragtag force of tribal warriors became a professional army of elite janissaries. And their capital moved from a simple fortress town in Asia to a major city in Europe. It's just off the charts.
They had built a machine of conquest and administration that seemed totally unstoppable. As the 14th century closed, a new, formidable power had arrived on the world stage. The question was no longer if the Ottomans would survive, but who in the world could possibly stop them.